Welcome back to the course. Now in this section we're going to talk about MongoDB's structure and how things are going to work when we're working with MongoDB. So first thing is, why do we need databases in the first place? And the thing is that before we used to work with files like these files right here. Like imagine this is a file and you used to directly work with the file system, right? We used to save files, we used to write to files. We used to have our own functions that would go to the file, open it up, save it as any extension that we wanted to save it as, and just write things word by word the way we wanted it to be. And then we had to create our own dictionary structure and save it like that. The problem with that approach is, the first is that you have to write every function yourself. So no matter what how do I search, how do I sort the values, how do I get specific value, and the most important thing is, how do I build relationships among the data? Because when you're storing files, maybe this approach is good, but when you're storing data that is meaningful, that has some relation in between, this is definitely not the right approach. Another point is availability. You're storing it locally on your computer, and what if you want to create a system that can be accessed by multiple computers? What if you want to have data to be accessed by a lot of computers? Another thing is scalability. Let's say you're making an application that is big, very big application, and stores a lot of data. Then how are you going to deal with that? So we don't need to worry about it ourselves. We don't need to write our Python code that writes files and saves it locally. We need to use a database solution like MongoDB that does it for us. And what MongoDB does is that it takes a file for you. It says, don't worry about the files, just write your code. I'm going to come in, I'm going to take whatever you give me, and I'm going to store it the way I want to store it. MongoDB is going to store it in its own way, locally, or if you are using MongoDB Cloud, there is an option. And so MongoDB does its own thing. You give it a dictionary, and for example, there's another example that MongoDB does. It stores it like this. Let me just resize it. So you have this thing right here. This is like a dictionary, absolutely, and it stores data in this form, and you have your name, mission, worth, whatever. But more important thing is this underscore ID. This underscore ID is created for every document that you store. Now let me get back to it and refresh a little bit. So what we're doing here, we have this thing called Python code, and Python code you write, you connect it with this database. You connect it with this database called MongoDB, and MongoDB is a NoSQL database, so it's not structured. There's a thing called structured query language, and if you don't know that, it's okay. But with SQL, you have a different language. There is no SQL here. There is, you just call a function, pass in the file that, oh well, I want this dictionary with this, or a group of dictionaries, could be that, and this MongoDB just takes it. It's a server that's running, and it says give me that, takes it, and it stores it. Just stores it locally. And how it stores it is like this, in this form. And this form is very interesting. First of all, it takes in, for example, let's say I passed in a dictionary that had name, mission, and worth. Then what MongoDB is going to do is going to keep track of my version and keep track of especially my object ID here. Not keep track of, but assign an object ID which is unique. It can assign about 16 million unique object IDs in a second. So there's a very small probability that you will ever get a duplicate object ID, but this thing is unique for each document, and creating that can help identify documents just like that they are. Like, I have this document with this ID, this is unique, and this can be identifiable with their specific identity. So this is very useful, as you will see, that you can just write function. You don't have to write any function, you just have to give it the dictionary and it'll take care of it. And of course this is scalable as well. And we're not going to go in too much depth here with MongoDB. We're not going to discuss schemas and some things that are complicated. We're just going to go into the CRUD operations and how you can maybe just approach data simply and just get to know how you can deal with Python and MongoDB in that sense. So let's get started. Let's get right into it, and let's write some code that can help us work with MongoDB. And so I'll see you in the next one.